I'll start this video off by saying this isn't intended as a refutation of Lacey Greene's points, and I don't necessarily disagree with everything she says. It's more a question of, can feminism harm men?
Some of you probably already know that I have a 16-year-old brother. This is him. He's basically my favorite person on the planet, and he's up there on the list of reasons why feminism is important to me. Boys face a number of pressures related to their gender.
Feminists can also put pressure on boys because of their gender.
For example, pressure to be physically tall and muscular.
Some men enjoy lifting weights to build muscle and reaping the benefits.
To push down feelings, especially fear and pain. To never cry or be vulnerable.
Feminists pressure me to express more feelings.
Pressure to be into sports or to have manly hobbies. To prove yourself using violence or intimidation to solve problems.
I've seen feminists define the hobbies I enjoy as toxic if the behavior is not feminine enough.
To prove your manhood by having lots of sex. Learning to see women as sex objects and struggling to have meaningful relationships with them.
Some men like having lots of sex and like looking at sexy women. You're pressuring me not to express what comes naturally to me.
Pressure to be one of the guys, to make harmless jabs at each other meant to establish dominance.
When we make harmless jabs at each other for humor, it's to entertain ourselves, not to establish dominance.
Pressure to be the protector in a relationship, never the protected.
Physically weaker people generally need more protection than the strong.
To be the breadwinner, the handyman, the money manager.
Some men seek out wealthier women. It's called finding a sugar mama. As far as being a handyman, some men seem to prefer that stuff more than women. The handyman is usually the person who knows how to fix things.
To pursue physically demanding, dangerous, or even violent jobs.
When it comes to jobs, some men prefer to do physical labor as opposed to sitting behind a desk. Dangerous jobs oftentimes pay more. Some people like having money and are willing to take the risk for the reward.
Pressure to be the leader and to always have the answers.
Sometimes I've been pressured in life to take charge, other times I volunteer to do it.
Is this sexism against men?
Feminists are just as bad at pressuring men.
Sexism is about exclusion and unequal power in society. It's about discrimination between individuals that bleeds into the workplace and into the law. It's about shaming, belittling, and devaluing the feminine.
Replace sexism with feminism, and you almost described how some feminists treat men. They exclude men from their circles who don't conform to the narrative. They try to get men fired from their jobs if they say or do the wrong thing because it was too offensive. Several aspects of manhood deemed unacceptable to feminists are defined as toxic masculinity. Men who enjoy traditionally male hobbies and traits are habitually shamed and belittled by feminists.
Notice how many of the pressures that boys face come down to defining themselves against women.
Notice how many of the pressures that boys face come down to feminist theory.
I'm a man because I'm not emotional, like women. I'm not physically small, like women. I know how to throw a ball or even a punch, unlike women.
It's toxic masculinity if I'm not emotional enough. It's toxic masculinity if men like developing big muscles and using them. It's toxic masculinity to engage in certain sports, especially contact sports like full contact fighting.
So much of the pressures that boys face in the world come down to the expectation that they not be like girls. These gender-specific pressures are a side effect of sexism.
What is it called when feminists pressure boys not to express a certain side of masculinity? Looks like sexism to me.
It's one version of masculinity, one way to be a real man that we impose on boys in a million subtle ways all throughout their lives, and the effects of that are serious.
Several things you framed as being harmful to boys because of society, I also happen to enjoy. It's feminists that keep telling me I should abandon what makes me happy.
From men who have been told to repress their emotions so long that they can't physically cry anymore, to men who are left emotionally stunted in their relationships.
Society shouldn't pressure men to suppress their emotions, just as feminists shouldn't pressure men to be more emotional. As far as relationships, there are aspects of feminism that can make relationships worse.
Caring fathers who can't get custody because nurturing is a girl thing. Men who were raped and not believed. A real man wants sex all the time. He must have liked it.
I've heard men's rights activists talk about stuff like that. You need to take that up with the more radical feminists that don't care to hear about men's issues.
Version of masculinity is also connected to homophobia. Gay men are demonized because they're stereotyped as feminine. They like to take care of their appearance, they like to dance, they sleep with men, too much like women.
A version of feminism is connected to the hatred of straight white men. Straight white men are demonized because they aren't feminine enough, not enough like women.
It's also uncomfortable when men date men or women date women. Who's the woman in the relationship? Who's the man? How do relationships without gender roles and gendered power dynamics even exist?
I'm gonna stop with the comparisons because I don't want to belittle or undermine Lacey's points. The point I'm making is feminists do a lot to demonize straight white men. They bathe in male tears, drink male tears, and want to hashtag kill all men.
And you want to go a step deeper, it's connected to transphobia as well. Transphobia stems from fear and insecurity about people violating gendered norms and hierarchies. Violence against trans women is especially common because she's seen as a man who's lowering himself to the level of a woman.
All that stuff is tragic, but you need to inform radical feminists to lay off the man-hating. If feminists cannot rise above that, then how are you any better than them? Not to say you in specific, so much as your movement.
And all that is where feminism's like, oh hey, so this is gonna be us. And it's actually terrible for society.
I just laid out some problems with feminism. It's also kind of BS. Some of the crap that goes on in feminist circles is not good for society.
There's more than one way to be a man or a woman. We all have a combination of feminine and masculine traits. It's part of being human.
There is more than one way to be a man or woman, but some feminists don't see it that way. They won't tolerate aspects of manhood deemed toxic.
Let's teach boys and girls to value equality, respect, nonviolence, instead of power, dominance, and aggression.
Case in point. You just said there is more than one way to be a man, but told me I shouldn't value power, dominance, or aggression. Those are not inherently bad traits, it's a matter of how they are used. As far as equality, man-hating is not equality. As long as I keep seeing prominent feminists hating on men, I will be skeptical of modern feminism.
Let's build a world where boys and girls can feel, can cry when they're sad, where we accept that emotions are part of being a human being and we teach boys and girls to manage them in healthy ways.
I also want a world where feminists will let boys be how they want to be and stop treating them like defective girls when they don't act feminine enough.
Where anyone can be the stay-at-home parent and it's no thing. Where you could choose to wear a dress or tux and no one cares because it's just clothes. Where women and men can be nurturers and protectors, nurtured and protected. Where girls and boys can be leaders. Where you can be strong sometimes and weak other times. A full dynamic human that can't be shoved into a box and told who to be.
I don't entirely disagree with you. Now, will you tell the radical feminists to stop shoving young boys into a box and telling them who they should be?
Obviously, the fact that women and girls face inequalities is reason enough to stand up against sexism. But let's not forget that sexism also affects men and boys. It affects gay men, lesbian women, trans folk, everyone in between.
Just as we should stand up to sexism, so we should stand up to man-hating feminists.
Understanding how these inequalities and attitudes permeate our society and working to correct them is in the best interest of everyone.
Equality is in everyone's best interest, and that includes being fair to men who express a side of masculinity feminists don't like.